In days of yore, there was a wondrous collaboration between those who costume. Published for this CocoVid were bounteous offerings, such that I could not watch them all during the event. Partly because I was editing, trying to get my contribution ready, and partly because the plentiful content was more, well, plentiful than the number of hours in the day. I still have not watched all of it. So when I cuddled up with a bowl of soup, trying to catch up with all the many offerings, I heard this.
Hey, Kenna, is a hot dog a sandwich?
If I went to a sandwich shop in the US, I couldn't get a hot dog, so no.
Okay. Is cereal soup?
No, if I went to a soup shop, I couldn't get a cereal. What's wrong with you, Noah?
Is lasagna a cake?
If I went to a cake shop, I guarantee you I could not find lasagna, so no.
So I'm going to take all of Kenna's credentials away as an academic at this point, because the Merriam-Webster defines all of those things as yes. I'm the only person who went to the dictionary. I got you. I belong with the academics.
It just so happens that the day after that, I had to go buy fabric. Muslin for draping. Nothing interesting. But what do I see before mine eyes? Hot dog printed cotton? So, did I control myself and not buy fabric that I don't need? No, my dear friends, of course I did not. What shall I make with this wonderfully anachronistic fabric, you may ask? Will it be a food-related object? An apron, perhaps? No, my dears, a chemise à la reine it shall be, queen of all garments. For indeed, a similar question can be asked about the chemise à la reine as about hot dogs. Is it a gown or a scandalous undergarment?
Do I have 1780s underpinnings, you may ask? I do not. It will have to be adapted for the modern day.
Therefore, I present to you Hotdog Historybounding. This will be made with modern methods and not 18th century ones, since it's just for fun and not research. In fact, I have done exactly 0 research for this video, and have absolutely no idea how this would have actually been done in period. Hence, historybounding. Post pre-shrinking, I cut out a fitted lining of this heavenly soft cotton with a princess seamed pattern I had to hand that I knew fit me, and sewed those princess seams together with a machine, because historybounding. I finished the seams by folding the seam allowances down and sewing very close to the edge, and press. Then I connected the side seams, and press. Then I made sure that the thing vaguely fit me, not worrying about it too much, since this pattern had previously undergone 3 mock-ups and a dress. And now the hot dogs. I ripped a long rectangle with the width being double the circumference of my body, and the length that I wanted the dress to be, folded the width into eighths, and ran separate gathering stitches in a contrasting color on each eighth. I then divided the fitted lining into eighths and marked where those dividing lines fell. I then matched those points together, making sure to pin the hot dogs to the lining and not to the dress form. Then I distributed the gathers evenly within that eighth of garment. I'm quite sure that in the 18th century there would have been much more fabric than just double my circumference, but then again, the fabric would have been lighter and not as stiff. I then took the whole thing off the dress form and pinned in between those gathers, making each ruffle teeny tiny. This is, of course, a recipe for running out of pins. I then proceeded to sew down all those gathers, sewing along the neckline and arm size of the fitted lining. With the shoulders and back pinned closed, I marked the underbust and waist placement. I recommend getting the help of another human being to do this. In the absence of other such humans, twist and turn until you can mark the dress on yourself in the mirror. Then, I pinned white bias tape along that underbust line. I didn't really have enough bias tape for the whole thing, so I worked some gathering in there too. I then sewed along the top edge of the bias tape. My plan is to run a ribbon through the bias tape to gather it, so therefore the next step is to make a buttonhole at the center front so that I can have access to that tape. I then sewed down the bottom of the bias tape. The next step was to hem the bottom of the fitted lining and pin all those gathers down at the waistline. First, I pinned the center back and center front, then the sides, then between all those points, each time dividing the excess down the middle until I had teeny tiny gathers and a lot of pins. I'm pretty sure that in period, the waist would have had a drawstring as well, but as I said, I did absolutely 0 research for this. Now, let us deal with Sleevels. First, I hemmed the sleeve lining so I wouldn't have to later deal with that tiny sleeve hem. Then I French seamed the side seams and pressed. Oh look, I have a new foldy irony sleevey thingy. And now I've got to deal with the outer sleeves. I cut hotdog rectangles that were slightly longer than the sleeve pattern and twice as wide. I put in contrasting gathering stitches, and after buying more white bias tape, I sewed one side of a length of it about halfway down the sleeve and another length towards the bottom. I then made buttonholes in the fabric in front of the bias tape, like I did for the underbust, and sewed down the other side of the bias tape. And hem! Narrow rolled hemfoot for the win! I closed the side seams with French seams. I then gathered the top to the undersleeve arm side with those gathering stitches, while making sure to keep the hems level. And now the time has come to set those sleeves in. As I have said, this pattern has undergone 3 mock-ups and a dress, so there was minimal wrestling with arm size. I decided to hem the dress at this point, so I could question my life choices now, instead of at a later date. It transpires that, in fact, my life choices were sound, and the hem isn't actually all that big. Ribbons come next. I threaded a lovely red satin ribbon through all those bias tape channels, and tied a bow.
And insert the zipper in the usual way. Just kidding, I'll tell you how I do it.
This is the way I originally learned how to insert invisible zippers. I have since come to the conclusion that almost no one else does it this way, but whatever. First, I put in a temporary contrasting seam, then press those seam allowances away from each other, creating a crease where I want the zipper to be. Then, making sure the temporary seam matches up with the middle of the zipper, I pin each side of the zipper to the seam allowance of the center back. Then, sew it down to the seam allowance just wherever in the zipper it is convenient to do so, taking the pins out as you go. Now, the evils of seam rippers become apparent. I have to unpick that temporary seam. Luckily, it's a long stitch and not secured at the ends. And now to sew the actual seam. You have to roll the teeth of the zipper out, and sew just underneath it. And there we go! We have a zipper! We have come now to the final stretch. I sewed some white bias tape along the edge of the neckline, flipped it over to the inside, and felled it down, so the stitches will not be seen from the outside. It is at this point that I get to don this wonderful vision of hotdog finery, flip my curls on top of my head, and tie a ribbon around them in a probably slightly later period than this dress style, and prance around living my best, vaguely neoclassical life. So, is a hot dog a sandwich? Noelle has decreed that the only answer to this question can come from a dictionary. This is, of course, our primary source regarding hot dogs, because we are academic hot dog historians, of course. Dictionary.com asserts that hot dog, noun, is either 1. a frankfurter, or 2. a sandwich, consisting of a frankfurter in a split roll, usually eaten with mustard, sauerkraut, or relish. But my dears, are we to believe this unpublished internet source? Or shall we consult a paper book that we can hold in our hands? Webster's College Dictionary declares, hot dog, noun, is a frankfurter, especially a cooked frankfurter, usually served in a long split roll. So, my dears, are we to believe one source that concurs with Noelle and says a hot dog is a sandwich, or the other that says, like Kenna, that a hot dog is a split roll, not a sandwich? I believe further research is required. I shall look into hot dog research grants. Oh well, at least I have a dress. Maybe I'll eat some cake. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to see further content. Let me know in the comments below if you know of any hot dog research grants. Have a nice day!